there is something happening inside you that you cannot fully explain. It started quietly, the way most important things do. Maybe it was a feeling that arrived one morning before you even opened your eyes. A low and steady pressure in your chest that had no name and no clear cause. You lay there in the silence and you knew, without knowing why you knew, that something was shifting. Not outside of you. Inside, deep inside, in a place that ordinary words rarely reach. And instead of the shift feeling like relief, it felt like standing at the edge of something enormous. Something that stretched further than your eyes could see. You have been losing things lately. Not always physical things, though sometimes that too. You have been losing your appetite for conversations that used to feel comfortable. Gatherings that once felt warm now feel hollow. And you sit among people you have known for years and feel a distance you cannot bridge with small talk. It is not that you love them less. It is that something in you has outgrown the frequency of those spaces. And no matter how hard you try to fit back into them, you return. Home feeling more alone than when you left. That loneliness is not a wound. It is a signal. But you did not know that yet. Your sleep has changed. You wake at hours that feel intentional. 2 in the morning, 3, sometimes 4, and the waking does not feel random. It feels like a summons. You lie in the dark and your mind does not race with worry the way anxious minds do. Instead, it reaches, it searches, it turns inward with a hunger that daylight somehow dims. There are nights when you feel the weight of something pressing against the inside of your ribs. Not pain, exactly, but urgency. As though something enormous is trying to be born through you, and the labor has already begun whether you consented to it or not. Your interests have shifted in ways that confuse the people around you. Things you once pursued with energy now feel like costumes you have taken off. And new hungers have arrived, quieter ones. Ones that pull you toward stillness, toward meaning, toward questions that have no quick answers. You find yourself pausing in the middle of ordinary moments, washing dishes, driving a familiar road, sitting in a meeting, and suddenly the ordinary world around you feels paper thin, as though just behind it something vast and luminous is pressing through, waiting to be seen. You have tried to explain this to people you trust, and the explanations have not landed the way you hoped. The words come out, and they sound almost right but not quite, and you watch the other person nod politely, and you know they do not fully understand. And you are not angry at them for that. You simply file the experience back inside yourself and carry it forward alone. That aloneness has a particular texture. It is not the aloneness of abandonment. It is the aloneness of someone who is being taken somewhere that no one else around them has been given a map to reach. You have wondered if something is wrong with you. That question has visited you more than once. In the quiet moments, in the honest moments, you have sat with the possibility that you are broken in some way that cannot be fixed, that the restlessness you feel is a flaw rather than a function, that the distance between you and the life you are living is evidence of failure rather than evidence of calling. You have entertained that thought, and it has cost you. But here is what is also true. That thought is a lie, and somewhere beneath the noise of that lie, you already know it. Because there is another voice, quieter than the doubt, steadier than the fear, older than anything you have learned. And that voice does not speak in the language of worry. It speaks in the language of certainty, and what it says, over and over, in ways you feel more than hear, is simply this: you were made for more than this. Not more in the way the world measures more money, more recognition, more comfort, more in the way that only eternity can measure, more in the way that leaves a mark on the world that outlives the body that carried it. The pressure you feel is not a malfunction. The disconnection you are experiencing is not depression, though it can wear that coat for a season. The restlessness that follows you from room to room, from year to year, is not a problem to be solved with a better routine or a new goal. It is the rumble of a destiny that has been assigned to you before you ever took your first breath, and it is growing impatient with delay. Heaven is not passive about your purpose, and what you are feeling, that unnamed pressure, that holy restlessness, that quiet and relentless sense that you were made for something you have not yet fully stepped into, is not your imagination. It is a divine appointment pressing itself into the fabric of your daily life, asking you to pay attention. And now you are here, listening. That is not small. In a world full of noise, in a life full of demands, something in you chose this moment, chose stillness, chose to lean in rather than scroll past. That choice did not originate with you alone. There is a hand behind the moments that feel accidental. There is an author behind the chapters that feel random. And the chapter you are in right now, the one filled with unexplained changes and quiet upheaval, and a longing you cannot fully name. This chapter has a title, and the title is not suffering. The title is preparation. The scripture that has been present over this moment, long before you arrived here, speaks directly to what you are carrying. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. That verse was not written for someone who had it all together. It was written for people in exile, people in a strange land, people who had lost the life they once knew and had not yet seen the life they were being moved toward. It was written for the in-between, and you are in the in-between right now. And that is exactly where that promise is designed to reach you. This is not a space you wandered into. You were guided here. And what is about to unfold in this message, across every word and every section that follows, has been assembled for you with intention. Not every ear was meant to hear this. Not every heart was prepared to receive it, but yours is. And the fact that you are still here, still listening, still leaning in, is already evidence that something in you recognized what your mind has not yet fully articulated. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are being repositioned. Quietly, deeply, at a level that cannot be seen from the surface, but that will one day be undeniable to everyone who has ever known your name. If something in this moment has reached past your defenses and landed in a place that feels true, if even one sentence has described something you thought only you were carrying, then let that recognition be your first act of alignment. Type the number 112 in the comments right now, not as a performance, not as a ritual, but as a declaration to yourself and to heaven that you heard this, that you are present, that you are paying attention, that you are ready. Because what is coming next is going to go deeper, and you are going to want to be awake for every word of it. Something has already begun in you. That much is clear. The pressure you felt before you even found this message, the quiet unraveling of the life that used to fit, the sleep that breaks open at hours that feel chosen rather than accidental, none of that was random interference. All of it was movement. All of it was the beginning of something that does not yet have a name in your vocabulary, but that your spirit has been fluent in since before you were born. And because this is true, because you are in the middle of a transition that feels larger than anything you have navigated before, it matters deeply that you understand you are not the first. You are not pioneering a path through territory that has never been walked. There is a story woven into the ancient text that carries your fingerprints, a story so precise in its details, so uncanny in its parallels, that when you hear it clearly, not as a distant religious tale, but as a living mirror held up to your own life, something in you is going to exhale for the first time in a long time. Because recognition is one of the most healing forces available to a human soul. To see yourself in someone else's story is to understand that your story was never a mistake. The person whose life we are going to walk through together is not one of the most frequently cited figures. He is not the one whose name fills Sunday morning sermons every week, but his story is one of the most precise maps of the chosen one's journey that exists anywhere in the ancient world. His name is Elijah. And before you place him in a box of religious memory, before you reduce him to a category or a Sunday school image, stay with this. Because Elijah's life does not read like the story of a triumphant saint moving from glory to glory. It reads like the story of someone who burned brightly, who stood in impossible places, who carried a fire that no one around him could fully understand, and who then, at the height of his public power, collapsed completely. And it is in that collapse, in that wilderness season, that his story becomes most relevant to where you are right now. Elijah was a prophet in a time when the land was ruled by a king named Ahab and a queen named Jezebel, and the atmosphere of that era was one of deep spiritual corruption. The culture around Elijah had turned away from truth. The things that were being celebrated publicly were the things that destroyed privately. The voices that were loudest were the voices that were most wrong. And Elijah stood in the middle of that. And he carried something different, something that did not belong to the temperature of his time, a fire that came from a source the crowd had stopped consulting. You know what that feels like. You have lived in rooms where the loudest voices were not the wisest ones. You have sat in seasons where the culture around you moved in a direction that your insides quietly refused to follow, even when following would have been so much easier. That internal refusal, that inability to fully assimilate into something your spirit knows, is not aligned with what you were made for. That is not stubbornness. That is the same fire Elijah carried. It is the fire of someone whose frequency was set before the world got to them. Elijah called down fire from heaven on Mount Carmel in one of the most dramatic moments in all of Scripture. He stood before 450 prophets of a false god, and he did not flinch. He prayed once, simply, without performance, and the fire fell. And the crowd, who had been wavering between two opinions, fell on their faces in acknowledgement of the truth they had been suppressing. That was a moment of undeniable, visible, public vindication for a man who had been carrying his conviction alone for years before anyone witnessed it. But here is what happened next, and this is the part they do not always tell you. Immediately after the greatest victory of his public life, Elijah ran. A threat came from Jezebel, a single message of violent opposition, and Elijah, the man who had just called fire from the sky, collapsed under a juniper tree in the wilderness and asked to die, he said. It is enough. He was exhausted. He was alone. He was done. The fire that had been so visible on the mountain was nowhere to be found in the wilderness. And in that moment, Elijah was not a hero. He was a human being who had given everything he had and found himself empty in the aftermath. If you have ever poured yourself completely into something, given your whole self to a calling or a season or a person, and then found yourself sitting in the quiet aftermath wondering where you went and whether you had anything left, you know the juniper tree. You know what it feels like to have the crowd gone, the moment past, the fire seemingly quiet, and to be left alone with the weight of your own humanity. The chosen path does not protect you from that place. It often leads you directly to it. But watch what heaven did. Heaven did not send a lecture. Heaven did not send a correction. Heaven sent an angel who touched Elijah and said, "Arise and eat." Not arise and get back to work. Not arise and stop feeling sorry for yourself. Arise and eat. Because the journey is too great for you. There was bread baked on coals and a jar of water waiting for him. And the angel let him rest, and then came back a second time and said it again. Arise and eat, because the journey ahead of you is too great for you to make on your strength alone. That is the word that belongs to you in this season. The journey ahead of you is too great for you to make on your strength alone. And heaven knows that. Heaven is not standing over your wilderness season with arms crossed. Heaven is crouching down beside you with provision, with rest, with the quiet and unmistakable message that you are not finished, that what looked like collapse was actually a necessary emptying, that you cannot carry the next volume of your calling if you are still clinging to the weight of the last one. Elijah got up, he ate, he drank, and he walked 40 days in the strength of that single meal, all the way to the mountain of God. Not because he felt ready, not because the threat from Jezebel had been removed, not because his emotions had caught up with his calling. He walked because he was fed by something that came from outside himself, something that met him in his lowest moment and gave him exactly what he needed to take the next step. Your provision is already being prepared. The thing that is going to carry you through the next 40 days of your journey, metaphorically speaking, is not going to look the way you expect it to look. It rarely does. Chosen ones receive their provision in forms that the ordinary eye overlooks. A word spoken at the right moment, an unexpected door, a sudden clarity in the middle of a long confusion, a rest that restores more than sleep should logically be able to restore. These are not coincidences. These are the angel crouching beside the chosen one and saying, "Arise and eat, the journey ahead is too great." The scripture that holds this entire reality together was written for exactly the season you are in. It says, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint." Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. Waiting in the context does not mean passive inactivity. In the original language, the word carries the meaning of twisting together, like a rope being braided. It is the image of your strength being intertwined with a strength that is not yours. It is the picture of someone who stops relying entirely on their own reserves and allows another source to be woven into the fiber of who they are. That is what the wilderness does to the chosen one. It creates the conditions for that braiding to happen. It strips away the false reserves, the performance, the self-sufficiency, so that something real and lasting and divinely sourced can be woven in its place. Elijah came out of the wilderness different from how he went in. He came out with a renewed commission. He came out with a new assignment. He came out with a successor waiting for him, a legacy being prepared, a continuation of his fire in a younger generation that he could not have accessed if he had stayed on the mountain of his greatest triumph. The wilderness was not the end of his story. It was the corridor between chapters. You are in the corridor right now, and corridors are disorienting by nature. They are not designed for settling. They are not designed for comfort. They are designed for movement, for transition, for carrying you from one room to the next. The discomfort you feel in this season is not evidence that you are in the wrong place. It is evidence that you are in the in-between, and the in-between, as uncomfortable as it is moving you somewhere. Stay present. Stay honest. Do not rush toward resolution just to escape the discomfort of the corridor, because what is being formed in you right now, in the quiet, in the unexplained pressure, in the wilderness that looks like it has no exit, is the very substance that the next chapter of your life is going to require. Elijah could not have walked 40 days in his own strength, but he walked it in the strength that was given to him in his lowest moment, and you will do the same. You walked through the wilderness with Elijah, and you felt the recognition of that juniper tree, that hollow exhaustion after giving everything, that moment of collapse that heaven refused to treat as a conclusion. And now something in you is more awake than it was when this message began. That awakening is not accidental. It is the direct result of truth meeting a heart that was ready to receive it. So stay here, stay present, because what is coming now is specific. It is precise. It is kind of clarity that chosen ones in the middle of their transition desperately need. Not vague encouragement, not spiritual platitudes, but actual signposts that confirm what you have been sensing, but could not yet articulate. There are 5 prophetic signs that indicate a chosen one is entering their calling, not approaching it distantly, not circling it from a safe distance, entering it, actively, irreversibly, crossing the threshold from the life that was into the life that was always meant to be. And as you hear each one, do not listen with your analytical mind first. Let it land in your body. Let it land in the part of you that recognized the pressure, the restlessness, the disconnection described at the beginning of this message. Because the signs are not theoretical. They are things you have already been living, and naming them changes everything. The first sign is this: the relationships that once sustained you have begun to feel insufficient, and new connections are drawing you toward people and spaces you would not have sought a year ago. This is not fickleness. This is realignment. When a person begins to move into their calling, the relational landscape shifts. People who were assigned to a previous chapter of your life begin to feel distant, not because love has left, but because the frequency has changed. You are operating at a different vibration now, and relationships that were built on who you used to be struggle to hold the weight of who you are becoming. Simultaneously, you may find yourself drawn toward people who carry something you cannot name but can feel, a depth, a groundedness, a fire that mirrors the fire beginning to rise in you. Do not apologize for this shift. Do not force yourself back into relational spaces that your spirit is being called out of. The chosen one's community is assembled by heaven, and heaven is selective about who is placed in proximity to a life that is about to be used in significant ways. The second sign is this: you have been experiencing an unusual sensitivity to environments, words, and atmospheres that you previously moved through without much awareness. Things that used to not bother you now create a noticeable resistance in your body. Certain environments feel heavy in a way that is almost physical. Certain conversations feel like static against a signal you are trying to receive clearly. Certain spaces drain you within minutes of entering them, while others, often quieter and less crowded ones, restore you in ways that seem disproportionate to the time spent there. This heightened sensitivity is not a weakness. It is a calibration. Your discernment is being refined because what you are being sent into will require you to read rooms, read people, and read atmospheres with an accuracy that ordinary perception cannot provide. The discomfort of that sensitivity in this season is the training ground for the gift it will become in the next one. The third sign is this: you have been receiving ideas, visions, impressions, and creative insights at a frequency and a depth that feels new. They arrive at unusual times, in the space between sleeping and waking, in the middle of mundane tasks, in moments of stillness that you stumbled into rather than planned. And these ideas do not feel like ordinary thoughts. They feel like transmissions. They feel like something is being downloaded into you rather than generated by you. You may have dismissed some of them as fantasy, as wishful thinking, as the mind's attempt to escape a difficult present. But look at them again more honestly. Because the chosen one, in the season just before their calling fully opens, begins to receive glimpses of what they are being sent to build, to carry, to speak, to create. Those glimpses are not distractions from your real life. They are previews of it. The fourth sign is this. You have been confronted, repeatedly and inescapably, with the theme of your purpose, not in a single dramatic revelation, but in a quiet and persistent accumulation. A conversation turns unexpectedly toward a topic that has been circling in your inner life for months. A book falls open to a passage that addresses the exact question you have been sitting with in private. A stranger says something in passing that lands with a weight far exceeding its apparent simplicity. You notice patterns, recurring words, recurring themes. A sense that the universe, or rather the God who made it, is underlining something for you, pointing at it from multiple directions, saying, "Look here, this is where you are going. Stop pretending you do not see it. This is not coincidence. This is divine coordination." And the chosen one who learns to pay attention to these convergences, rather than explaining them away, begins to move with a confidence that the world calls unusual, but that heaven calls obedience. The fifth sign is this. You have arrived at a place of internal honesty that is both terrifying and liberating, where you can no longer convincingly perform contentment with a life that is smaller than what you were made for. The performance used to work. You could go through the motions, say the right things, show up in the right places, and hold the gap between your inner reality and your outer presentation closed through sheer effort. But that gap is no longer closable. Something has cracked open in you, and the light is coming through whether you planned for it or not. That crack is the fifth sign, because it means the old container is no longer sufficient for what is growing inside you, and the breaking of the container, painful as it is what allows the new thing to finally have room to breathe. Now, here is where something remarkable enters this conversation. Here is where the spiritual and the scientific shake hands in a way that will make complete sense to you if you have been tracking the reality of what you are carrying. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. Before you let that word feel clinical or detached from everything sacred we have been speaking about, stay with this. Because what the ancient text describes as the fire of God moving through a human life, and what neuroscience has now begun to measure in the brains of those operating at their highest and most creative capacity, are not two different things wearing two different names. They are the same reality being described through two different vocabularies, and the bridge between them is something you need to know about right now, in this season, because it is directly relevant to the threshold you are standing on. A neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers, trained at MIT with over 30 years of dedicated research into the human brain, and with significant ties to research conducted in collaboration with NASA, spent the equivalent of thousands of days studying one central question. Why do some people access states of profound creativity, clarity, intuition, and breakthrough thinking with what seems like natural ease, while others, equally intelligent and equally motivated, remain stuck below that threshold their entire lives? What he discovered was not a difference in intelligence. It was not a difference in discipline or desire. It was a difference in brainwave frequency. Specifically, he identified that the individuals who consistently operated at their highest capacity, the innovators, the visionaries, the people whose ideas changed rooms and changed industries and changed lives, shared a measurable neurological signature. Their brains moved fluidly between theta waves, which operate between 4 and 8 cycles per second and are associated with deep creativity, accelerated learning, and the kind of intuitive knowing that feels like it comes from somewhere beyond the thinking mind. And gamma waves, which represent the highest measurable frequency of brain activity and are associated with moments of sudden insight, peak mental performance, and what researchers sometimes call the eureka state. Here is what Dr. Rivers also discovered. These frequencies are not fixed gifts that some people are born with and others are not. They are trainable states. The brain, because of a property called brainwave entrainment, will naturally synchronize with external frequencies when those frequencies are delivered correctly, which means that the state your brain needs to access in order to receive, process, and act on the kinds of transmissions and insights that chosen ones in their calling regularly experience is not locked behind years of meditation training or exceptional genetic luck. It can be reached in 7 minutes. The Genius Wave is a precisely engineered audio experience built on the research of Dr. Rivers and grounded in the science of binaural beats and isochronic tones. Frequencies calculated with exactness to guide your brain gently and efficiently into the theta and gamma states where clarity lives, where creative download happens, where the insights you have been straining to receive begin arriving with a naturalness that surprises you. 7 minutes each day. That is the protocol. Not an hour of silent meditation. Not a specialized practice requiring years of discipline. 7 minutes, listened to through headphones, and the frequency begins to do what it was designed to do. A woman who'd been in the same suffocating professional situation for nearly 3 years, someone who described herself as mentally fogged and spiritually shut down, began using the Genius Wave. Within the first week, she reported a clarity she had not felt in years. Within the second week, she had made a decision she had been paralyzed about for months. Within a month, her income had shifted in a direction she had stopped believing was available to her. Another person, a man who had been carrying the weight of a creative calling he could not seem to access, found that after consistent daily use, the ideas that had been jammed began to flow. Not a trickle, a flood. You may be sitting with a thought right now that sounds something like this: $39 is not nothing. And that thought is valid. That thought is honest, and it deserves to be honored rather than brushed past. $39 represents real effort, real hours, real sacrifice, and no one should minimize that. But consider what you have already spent trying to close the gap between where you are and where you know you are meant to be. Consider the cost of another year lived below, the frequency of your calling. Consider what it is worth to you to have your mind operating in the state where the insights, the clarity, and the decisive action that your calling requires actually become accessible rather than perpetually just out of reach. The Genius Wave is normally priced at $49. Through the link in the pinned comment and the description below, it is available today for just $39. It comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, 100%, no questions asked. If you are not satisfied with your experience, there is no risk in the purchase. The only risk is in continuing to operate below the frequency you were designed to carry. Purchase only through the official link in the pinned comment or the description. There are imitations circulating, and they do not carry the precision of the original research. The genuine product is available only through that single verified source. And because this price point is being offered for a limited time with a limited number of purchases available at this rate, if something in you is saying yes, do not let the moment pass. The chosen one who hesitates at every threshold never crosses any of them. This is your moment to move. And now, having stood at that threshold, having looked honestly at the science and the invitation and the practical door that has been opened for you, something in you may need a moment to breathe. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. Because the chosen one does not move from marketplace back into the sacred without our bridge, and this is that bridge. Let the transaction settle if it needs to settle. Let the decision sit in whatever place it has landed in you, and then come back. Come all the way back. Because what was being spoken before the science entered the room has not finished speaking. The frequency conversation was not a detour from the spiritual journey. It was a confirmation of it. And now the journey continues, deeper, quieter, and with more at stake than before. There is a reality about the chosen one's path that almost no one prepares you for. It is not the opposition. It is not the sacrifice. It is not even the loneliness. Though all of those are real, and all of them will visit you at different points along the way. The thing that almost no one prepares you for is the silence. The long, unlit, seemingly unproductive silence that falls between the moment you first recognize your calling and the moment it becomes visible to the world around you. That silence is not abandonment, but it feels like it. And in the feeling of it, many chosen ones make the most costly mistake available to them. They interpret the silence as a sign that they were wrong about themselves. They take the absence of immediate confirmation as evidence that the call was imagined, that the fire was emotion rather than truth, that the press toward purpose was wishful thinking dressed in spiritual language. Elijah knew that silence. After his 40-day walk and his arrival at the mountain of God, he entered a cave. And the word of God came to him there, not with fanfare, not with visible fire, but with a question. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And Elijah answered with the raw and unfiltered truth of a man who had spent everything he had in service of something he could no longer see the fruit of. He said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and slain your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." He was not being dramatic. He was being honest. He felt alone. He felt unseen. He felt as though the investment of his entire life had produced nothing lasting, and that he was the last one standing in a cause that was losing. That is a prayer many chosen ones pray in private, with no audience and no performance. Just the raw admission that the calling has cost more than anticipated, and the returns are not yet visible. If you have ever sat in that cave, if you have ever spoken those words in your own language, into the silence of a room that felt like it was not listening, then you know that what Elijah described is not ancient history. It is a living human experience that recurs in every generation in the life of every person who dares to carry something that the majority around them cannot see. And here is what God did in response to that prayer. He did not argue with Elijah's assessment of the situation. He did not correct the theology or the emotion or the exhausted exaggeration of a man who had been carrying too much for too long. He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And then something extraordinary happened. A great wind tore through the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces. But God was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But God was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire. But God was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. And it was in the still small voice that the presence of the one who had made Elijah and called him and sustained him and never once abandoned him finally made itself known. This is one of the most important truths available to a chosen one in a season of silence. You have been looking for God in the wind, in the dramatic, in the undeniable, in the moment that would be so obvious it would silence every doubt and answer every question and make the path forward clear in a way that required no faith at all. And God has not been in any of those places. Not because God is absent, but because God is in the still small voice. And the still small voice cannot be heard over the noise of a life that has not yet been willing to enter the cave. The cave is not a punishment. The cave is a gift. It is the only place quiet enough for the frequency of heaven to be received without interference. It is the space where the chosen one, stripped of performance in public and the noise of other people's opinions and expectations, finally becomes still enough to hear what has been speaking all along. You have been in a cave. Maybe you have been calling it depression. Maybe you have been calling it confusion. Maybe you have been calling it failure. But what if it has been something else entirely? What if it has been the mercy of a God who loves you enough to take you somewhere quiet so that you can finally hear what the noise of your ordinary life has been drowning out? Because what God spoke to Elijah in the still small voice was not a rebuke. It was a recommission. Go, return on your way. There is more. The story is not over. The calling has not been revoked. The silence was not the end. It was the deepening. It was the rooting. It was the moment that would make everything that came next sustainable in a way that the earlier fire, brilliant as it was, could not have been without this. You are being recommissioned right now. Not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire. In the still small voice that is moving through every word of this message and finding the places in you that are ready to receive it. And what it is saying to you is the same thing it said to Elijah. Go, return on your way. There is more. You are not finished. The investment of your life has not been wasted. The seeds planted in the silent seasons will produce a harvest in the visible seasons that will stagger the people who watched you go through the dark and wondered if you would make it out. The scripture that belongs to this moment, to the cave, to the still small voice, to the recommissioning of a chosen one who has been in a long silence, is this. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Chapter 40, verse 29. Not to the already strong, not to the ones who held it together without flinching, to the weary, to the weak, to the ones who used all of it and found themselves empty in a cave on the side of a mountain, honest enough to admit it. That is who receives the increase. That is who receives the fresh strength, not as a reward for performance, but as a gift to the honest. And you have been honest in this season. You have carried your weakness without the comfort of a crowd, and that honesty has positioned you to receive something that the polished and the performing cannot access. There is something else about the chosen one's silence that must be said, because it directly addresses a specific kind of pain that this season often produces. In the silence, comparison becomes a weapon. You look at the lives of people around you, people who do not seem to be in a cave, people who appear to be moving forward with momentum and visibility and measurable progress. And something in you begins to calculate the gap between their apparent trajectory and yours. And the calculation is cruel, because it takes no account of what is being built underground. It measures only what is visible above the surface. And the chosen one in the cave has almost nothing visible above the surface during the deepest parts of their preparation. A tree that will one day be strong enough to withstand storms that would flatten ordinary trees does not show that strength the early years. What is happening in those early years is happening underground, in the root system, in the unseen foundation that the visible trunk will one day rest on. The years when the tree looks ordinary, when it looks slow, when it looks unremarkable compared to other trees that are growing faster and spreading wider above the soil. Those are the years when the roots are going deepest, and the depth of the roots determines the height the tree will eventually reach without falling. Your roots are going deep right now, and the people around you who appear to be ahead of you above the soil have not necessarily invested in the underground work that you are doing in this season. Their momentum is visible. Your momentum is hidden. But hidden momentum is not absent momentum. It is the most powerful kind, because it is the kind that does not require external validation to continue. It is the kind that is not dependent on the wind or the earthquake or the fire to sustain itself. It is fed by the still small voice, and the still small voice never runs out of words for the one who has become quiet enough to hear them. There is something else God gave Elijah in that recommissioning that deserves your full attention. He told him that he was not alone, that contrary to Elijah's most painful and most privately held belief, there were 7,000 others in Israel who had not bowed to the false god. 7,000 who were also carrying the same fire in quieter, less visible, less dramatic ways. Elijah did not know about them. Their existence had been hidden from his awareness during the season when he most needed to feel less alone. You do not know about all the others. You do not have full visibility into the lives of every other person who is in a cave right now, carrying the same unnamed pressure, feeling the same holy restlessness, sitting with the same 5 prophetic signs that we named together in the section just before this one. But they are there. They are listening to messages like this one. They are sitting in their own quiet rooms at 3 in the morning, with a hunger they cannot name and a calling they cannot yet see the full shape of. And the God who knows where every one of them is has not abandoned a single one. You are in a room far more populated than it appears, and the still small voice is moving through all of it. The cave is behind you now, not because the silence has fully lifted, not because every question has been answered or every shadow has been chased from the room, but because something in you has shifted it in the receiving of what was just spoken. You heard the still small voice, maybe not perfectly, maybe not without the interference of doubt still running quietly in the background, but you heard it, and the hearing of it, even partial, even through the static of a season that has cost you more than you expected, is enough to take the next step. Because chosen ones do not require perfect conditions to move forward. They require only enough light for the next step. And you have that. You have always had that, even in the moments when you were most convinced that the darkness was total. So let us go deeper now. Let us go into the territory that most people who talk about calling and purpose and destiny carefully avoid, because it is uncomfortable and it does not photograph well, and it does not fit neatly into the kind of inspiring content that gathers quick approval. Let us talk about what the chosen one's path actually costs, not in the abstract, not in the sanitized version that makes suffering sound poetic and pain sound productive without acknowledging the weight of actually living through it. Let us talk about the real texture of the in-between, that long corridor between the recognition of calling and the full manifestation of it, and what it requires of the person walking it. Elijah walked back into that corridor after the cave. He had been recommissioned. He had heard the still small voice. He had been told that he was not alone, that 7,000 others were carrying the same fire. And then he walked back out into the world that had not changed. Jezebel was still on the throne. The cultural corruption was still entrenched. The false gods were still being worshipped publicly and loudly. The death threat against him had not been withdrawn. Nothing in the external landscape had shifted to confirm the internal recommissioning. And Elijah had to walk forward anyway, into the same world that had broken him, carrying a renewed commission that the world could not yet see and would not immediately validate. That is the specific courage that the chosen one's path requires, not the dramatic courage of standing on a mountain and calling fire from the sky. That kind of courage, while real and costly, comes with an audience. It comes with the adrenaline of a public moment. The more ordinary and more grinding courage is the courage of walking back into the unchanged world after a private encounter with something holy and continuing to carry what you were given without external confirmation that you are, not imagining it. That is the courage that does not make the highlight reel. That is the courage that happens in the Tuesday afternoons and the ordinary Wednesday mornings and the quiet Thursday evenings when no one is watching and the calling still has to be carried regardless. You know this courage. You have been exercising it for longer than you have been calling it courage. Every day that you have gotten up and continued to move towards something you cannot yet fully see, every day that you have chosen not to abandon the inner knowing, simply because the outer evidence has not yet aligned with it, every day that you have refused to settle permanently into the smaller life that the world around you keeps offering as a reasonable alternative, you have been doing the thing that Elijah did when he walked back out of the cave. You have been returning on your way. You have been continuing the journey that the silence could not kill and the opposition could not permanently stop. But let us be honest about what that journey does to a person over time. Because the chosen one's path is not only a spiritual journey, it is a deeply human one. And the human being walking it is not immune to the accumulated weight of delayed manifestation. There is a particular kind of fatigue that sets in when you have been in the in-between for what feels like too long. It is not the sharp fatigue of acute suffering. It is a slower, duller thing. It is the fatigue of sustained hope, the fatigue of continuing to believe in something that has not yet arrived. The fatigue of holding a vision with open hands when every instinct in you wants to either grip it so tightly that you crush it or release it entirely just to stop the strain of holding. This fatigue is real and it deserves to be named without shame, because the culture around calling and purpose rarely gives space for it. The narrative that circulates in most inspirational spaces is one of relentless forward momentum, of the chosen one who never wavers, who rises every time without visible struggle, who moves from strength to strength with a constancy that makes the watching world feel inadequate. That narrative is not honest, and it does not serve you. Because when you are sitting with the very real and very human fatigue of sustained hope, and you cannot find yourself in any version of the story being told, you conclude that something is wrong with you specifically, that your fatigue is evidence of insufficient faith or insufficient commitment or insufficient something. There is nothing wrong with you. The fatigue is the natural and entirely appropriate response of a human being who has been carrying a God-sized assignment in a human body. Elijah sat under a juniper tree and asked to die, not as a failure of faith, as a man who had given everything and had nothing left and was honest enough to say so. And heaven fed him. Heaven did not condemn him. Heaven fed him and told him the journey ahead required more than he currently had, and then gave him what was needed to walk it. You need to receive permission right now. Permission to be tired without it meaning you are finished. Permission to not have the answers without it, meaning you were wrong about the calling. Permission to sit in the in-between without having to perform certainty about when or how or in what form the manifestation will finally arrive. That permission is being given to you now, not by a human voice, but through one as a word that's been looking for you specifically and has found you in this moment. And now, having received that permission, having given yourself the grace to be exactly where you are, without apology or performance, the invitation is to look at what is actually being produced in you in this season. Because the in-between is not empty. It only looks empty from the outside. From the inside, if you are paying close attention, if you are listening with the kind of attention that the still small voice rewards, you will find that the most important work of your life is happening in exactly this season, in the season that looks from the outside like nothing is happening at all. Depth is being produced in you. Not the surface depth that comes from reading about suffering, but the cellular depth that comes from living through it, without abandoning the truth that sustains you. That depth is not available through a shortcut. It cannot be downloaded or fast-tracked or acquired through any means other than the actual living of a season like the one you are in. And the depth being produced in you right now is the very quality that will make everything you are about to step into sustainable, not just initiatable, sustainable. The fire that is fed by deep roots burns longer and steadier and more usefully than the fire that burns bright and brief on the surface. Character is being produced in you, not the performed version of character that looks good in public and holds no weight in private. Real character, the kind forged in the silence, in the waiting, in the choosing to continue when continuation felt irrational. The kind of character that cannot be faked and cannot be manufactured, and that every person who encounters you in the next chapter of your life will be able to sense without being able to fully explain what they are sensing. They will call it presence. They will call it substance. They will say there is something about you, and they will be right, because there is something about you. It was placed there before the world got to you, and it has been deepened by every season of the in-between that you have navigated without losing the thread of who you are. Compassion is being produced in you, and this one matters for the calling specifically, because the chosen one is not only called for their own benefit, they are called for the people who will one day be reached through them. And the quality of that reaching, the depth of its impact, the degree to which it actually meets people where they are rather than where it is convenient to find them, is directly proportional to the depth of suffering the carrier has been willing to walk through without becoming bitter. Elijah's compassion for the widow at Zarephath, his willingness to enter into the suffering of a woman who had nothing left, came from a man who had himself been at the edge of nothing. You cannot manufacture that compassion. You can only receive it as a byproduct of the journey. So the pit is not punishment. The delay is not denial. The silence is not abandonment. The cave is not a coffin. Every one of these seasons, as dark and as costly as they have been, has been doing something in you that could not have been done any other way. And the something it has been doing is preparing a vessel that can carry the weight of what is coming without breaking under it. Because what is coming is not small, and a small preparation would not have been sufficient. There is a specific word that belongs to every chosen one who is reading the length of their in-between season and feeling the weight of it today. The scripture speaks it plainly. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Due season. Not the season you scheduled, not the season that made the most logical sense on the timeline you drew for your own life. Due season. The season that is owed to the seed. The season that is determined not by your impatience, but by the completeness of the underground work. And the underground work in you is closer to completion than the surface of your life is currently suggesting. The harvest does not announce itself in an instant, it simply arrives. And when it arrives, it will be recognizable not as luck or coincidence or a sudden shift of circumstances, but as the inevitable outcome of a seed that was planted in faith and watered in tears and tended through seasons that felt too long and too dark to be producing anything at all. Do not give up. Not today. Not in this moment. Not when the message that has been sent to find you is still speaking, and the word that was assembled for your specific season has not yet finished what it came to do. The pit is becoming the platform. The cave is becoming the launching point. The silence is becoming the foundation of a voice that the world is going to need to hear, and you are the one carrying it. The pit is becoming the platform. You heard that in the closing words of what was just spoken, and if it landed where it was meant to land, it did not land gently. It landed with the weight of something true, something that has been true about your life for longer than you have had language for it. The seasons that felt like burial were never burial. They were planting, and the difference between those two things is everything. A buried thing is finished. A planted thing is only beginning. And you, chosen one, you have never been buried. You have been planted, deeply, intentionally, in that was chosen for you, before you had any say in the matter, by hands that knew exactly what they were doing, even when you could not see those hands, and could not understand the method, and could not feel anything other than the weight of the earth pressing in from every side. And now something is pressing upward. You can feel it. That is what this entire message has been tracing, from the unnamed pressure of the opening, through the wilderness of Elijah, through the 5 prophetic signs, through the still small voice in the cave, through the honest naming of the in-between and what it costs and what it produces. Every section has been a layer of soil being moved aside. Every word has been preparing the ground for what is now pressing toward the surface. And what is pressing more toward the surface is not small. It is not timid. It is not the cautious emergence of something unsure of its right to exist. It is the inevitable rise of something that was always going to arrive, that was always going to break through. Because what was planted in you was planted by the one who does not plant things without intending them to grow. So let us talk about what sustains the chosen one in the season of emergence. Because emergence is its own particular challenge. It is different from the in-between. In the in-between, the challenge is endurance. The challenge is holding on. The challenge is not releasing the thread of the calling, simply because you cannot yet see where it leads. But emergence brings a different set of challenges. Emergence brings visibility after a long season of hiddenness. Emergence brings the expectation of others pressing in on the tender new thing that is just beginning to find its form. Emergence brings the risk of moving too fast, of allowing the momentum of finally breaking through to carry you past the roots that were so carefully developed in the underground season. The chosen one in the season of emergence needs community, not the kind of community that surrounds the successful and the arrived, not the crowd that gathers when the fire is visible and the results are measurable and the platform is established. The chosen one in emergence needs the community that was also in the cave, the community that also felt the unnamed pressure and recognized the 5 signs and sat under their own juniper tree and heard the still small voice calling them back to the path. That community is rare. It is not found in every room, but it exists, and you are sitting in one of the spaces where it gathers right now. This channel, this space, these messages, they are not content in the way that the world uses that word. They are not entertainment designed to fill the idle minutes of a scrolling life. They are a gathering place, a place where the ones who carry something they cannot fully explain in ordinary language, come to find words for what they are living. A place where the fire in one person's chest recognizes the fire in another person's chest across whatever distance separates the body from the knee. Screen. And in that recognition, something happens that isolation cannot survive. Community forms. Not the loud, performative kind. The quiet, sustaining kind. The kind that says you are not alone, not as a motivational phrase, but as a lived and structural reality. If this space has been that for you, if these words have found you in the cave and accompanied you back out of it, if something spoken here has given language to something you have been carrying in silence, then there is something simple and meaningful you can to keep this gathering place alive and to extend its reach to the next person who is sitting in their own unnamed pressure right now, not yet knowing that a message assembled for their specific season is waiting for them. Like this message, not as a transaction, not as a mechanical engagement signal to be registered by an algorithm, though that is also what it does in a practical sense. Like it as an act of affirmation that what was spoken here had value, that truth was present, that the fire you carry recognized something in these words. That click is a small thing in your hand and a significant thing in the reach of this message, because every engagement signal tells platform that this content deserves to be placed in front of more people. And more people means more chosen ones in their caves, finding a word that was assembled for them. Your single click participates in that chain. Share this message, not because you are expected to, not because a script told you to, but because you thought of someone while you were listening. You know you did. There was a face that came to mind during the section about the cave. There was a name that surfaced during the words about the fatigue of sustained hope. There was someone in your life who is sitting under their own juniper tree right now, asking to be done, not knowing that they are not finished, not knowing that the still small voice is still speaking, not knowing that the harvest they planted in tears is closer than the surface of their life is suggesting. Share this with that person, not with a long explanation. Just send it. Let the message do what it was assembled to do. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. And if you have, turn on the notifications so that the next message finds you when it arrives, because this is not a one-time encounter. This is an ongoing gathering. Each message that comes from this space is assembled with the same intention, to find the chosen ones in the middle of their most important and most difficult seasons, to give language to what they are carrying, to remind them of who they are before the world got to them, and who they are still beneath every layer that the years have pressed down on top of the original. Subscribing is the practical act of saying, I want to be present for the next word. And the next word is always coming. And then there is one more thing, one more way that you can participate in what is being built here, and it is the most direct and the most tangible. There is a link in the description and in the pinned comment of this message. It is a donation link. And before you move past that sentence with the slightly uncomfortable feeling that often accompanies the mention of financial support in a spiritual space, stay here for a moment, because this deserves to be spoken about honestly rather than awkwardly gestured toward and quickly moved past. Creating messages of this depth and this length and this intentionality is not a casual undertaking. It requires hours of preparation, of sitting with the material, of listening for what is actually needed in this specific season, rather than what is simply popular or easily produced. It requires the kind of sustained attention and creative investment that cannot be maintained indefinitely without the practical support of the community that benefits from it. The people who gather here, who find these words, who share them and subscribe and return for the next one, they are the ones who make this possible. And the ones who are able to contribute financially, even in a small way, are doing something that reaches far beyond their individual gift. Because every contribution that comes through that link goes back into the work. It goes into the time that it takes to sit down and assemble the next word for the next chosen one in the next cave. It goes into keeping this space alive and active and reaching. It goes into the sustainability of a message that is not built on advertising revenue or sponsored content or any agenda other than finding the people who need to hear what is being spoken here and making sure they can hear it clearly, without the noise of commercial interest running underneath it. If you have been blessed by this space, if something spoken here has cost you nothing and given you something real, consider giving back. Whatever amount reflects your gratitude and your capacity. There is no floor and there is no ceiling. The link is there. The invitation is genuine. And the contribution you make, whatever its size, participates directly in the continuation of this work. Elijah was fed by an angel in the wilderness. He did not know who would feed him before the angel arrived. He only knew that he was empty and that the journey ahead required more than he had. The sustaining of this work operates on a similar principle of unexpected, community-sourced provision, and you may be the angel for someone else's wilderness season simply by sharing this message with the person whose face came to mind while you were listening, or by contributing in whatever way feel right to the continuation of this gathering place. What is being built here is not a platform in the way the world measures platforms. It is a room that stays lit so that the chosen ones who are navigating their darkest corridors have somewhere to come and find words for what they are living. And rooms like that require people who care enough to keep the lights on. You are one of those people. You have been one from the moment you found this space. And what you do with that, how you choose to participate in the keeping of this light, is between you and the still small voice that brought you here. Stay, keep listening. The message is not finished and neither are you. You are still here. That matters more than you may realize in this moment. Because the length of this journey, the depth of what has been covered from the unnamed pressure at the beginning to the cave of Elijah, to the 5 prophetic signs, to the science of frequency, to the honest naming of the in-between and the invitation to community, all of it has been building towards something. And the something it has been building toward is not a conclusion. It is a confrontation. A confrontation with the one reality about the chosen one's path that everything else in this message has been quietly circling. The reality of spiritual warfare. Not warfare in the theatrical sense, not the dramatic, cinematic version of spiritual conflict that makes for compelling imagery but rarely maps onto the actual texture of the battle that chosen ones face in their daily lives. The warfare that targets the chosen one is not loud. It is not obvious. It does not announce itself with the kind of clarity that would make resistance straightforward. It is subtle. It is patient. It is intelligent. And it operates most effectively not through dramatic, external opposition, but through the slow and almost imperceptible erosion of the chosen one's belief in their own identity. Because here is what the darkness understands about you that you may not have fully understood about yourself. Your identity is your greatest weapon, not your talent, not your intelligence, not your work ethic or your connections or your resources or any of the external factors that the world measures when it is trying to calculate a person's potential for impact. Your identity, the settled, rooted, unshakable knowing of who you are before any title or achievement or external validation is added to the equation. That knowing, when it is intact, makes you virtually impossible to stop. And when it is compromised, when the knowing becomes a question rather than a statement, you become vulnerable in ways that have nothing to do with external circumstances and everything to do with the internal landscape. This is why the warfare against chosen ones is almost always identity warfare. It does not come primarily as external obstacle, though external obstacles are real and they will come. It comes as a whisper, a suggestion, a quiet and persistent campaign to replace the settled knowing of who you are with a question that sounds reasonable enough to entertain. The question sounds like this: are you sure? Are you sure about what you sensed in the quiet? Are you sure about the calling? Are you sure? You are not simply a person with an inflated sense of your own significance, mistaking ordinary ambition for divine assignment. Are you sure you have not been deceived by your own desires? Are you sure, after everything, after all the evidence of the in-between, that you were not simply wrong? That question is the primary weapon, and it is effective precisely because it dresses itself in the clothing of humility. It presents itself as the reasonable, grounded, responsible alternative to what it frames as spiritual arrogance or self-deception. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like the voice of a sober and realistic assessment of your actual situation. But it is not wisdom. It is warfare. And the difference between the two matters enormously, because the response to genuine wisdom is recalibration, while the response to warfare is resistance. And if you mistake warfare for wisdom, you will recalibrate when you should be resisting, and the erosion will continue unchallenged. Elijah faced this warfare in its most acute form in the wilderness after Mount Carmel. The victory was behind him. The fire had fallen. The prophets of the false god had been confronted. The crowd had fallen on their faces in acknowledgement of the truth. And then Jezebel sent a single message. One message. And in that single message, the entire edifice of Elijah's confidence collapsed. Not because the message was true. Not because it carried any actual power over the destiny that had been assigned to him, but because it arrived at the moment of greatest depletion, when the reserves were empty and the emotional immune system was at its lowest, and it asked the one question that Elijah had no energy left to resist. What if it is over? What if this is where it ends? The timing of the warfare is not coincidental. The darkness does not waste its most effective campaigns on the chosen one when they are strong and rested and full of faith and surrounded by community. It deploys its most precise and most targeted attacks in the moments of depletion. After the great effort, after the significant investment, after the public victory or the private sacrifice or the long season of sustained endurance. In the moment when the armor is heaviest and the arms are weakest and the capacity for resistance is at its most compromised, that is when the whisper arrives. And the whisper sounds so reasonable in that moment, so aligned with the exhaustion, so confirmed by the emptiness. You need to know this not as abstract theology, but as operational intelligence. Because if you know that the timing of the attack is not coincidental, if you understand that the intensity of the warfare you are experiencing in a given season is often a direct indicator of the proximity of your breakthrough, then the attack itself becomes informative rather than simply devastating. The darkness does not mobilize its most sophisticated campaigns against people who are not a threat. The level of opposition you have faced, the persistence of the identity questions that have followed you through this season, the specific and targeted nature of the doubts that have visited you in your most depleted moments. These are not evidence that you are losing. They are evidence that what you carry is significant enough to be worth the effort of trying to stop. Think about that for a moment. Let it land completely. The warfare is proportional. The darkness is strategic, not random. It does not spend its resources attacking targets that are not dangerous to it. If you have been under sustained, intelligent, targeted, spiritual opposition, the most honest interpretation of that fact is not that you have been singled out for misfortune. It is that you carry something that the darkness has correctly identified as a threat to everything it is trying to maintain. You are not being attacked because you are weak. You are being attacked because you are a danger to the agenda of the darkness. And that danger comes directly from the calling placed inside you before the world began. Elijah did not know, in the wilderness under the juniper tree, that the very intensity of Jezebel's threat was a perverse confirmation of his significance. He only felt the exhaustion and the fear and the desire to be finished with the weight of it. But looking back across the span of the story, it is clear. The most dangerous moment for Jezebel's kingdom was not before Mount Carmel. It was after, because after Mount Carmel, the truth had been publicly demonstrated. After Mount Carmel, the crowd had seen with their own eyes what the fire could do. After Mount Carmel, the momentum of heaven was moving in a direction that could dismantle everything the false throne had built. And Jezebel, with perfect strategic instinct, went directly for the identity of the one carrying the fire. She did not try to argue theology. She went for the man. She went for the interior. She went for the question that would make Elijah himself do the work of stopping what she could not stop from the bull. Outside, you have a Jezebel, not necessarily a person, possibly a voice. Possibly a pattern of thought that has attached itself to the most vulnerable and most exhausted edges of your inner life. Possibly a memory that keeps surfacing to undermine the knowing. Possibly a relationship that consistently and subtly reflects back to you a version of yourself that is smaller than who you actually are. Whatever form it takes, it has been going for the interior. It has been going for the identity. It has been going for the settled knowing and trying to replace it with the question. And you have been fighting that battle in private, mostly without reinforcements, for longer than you should have had to fight it alone. But here is what the darkness never tells you. And here is what this moment is specifically assembled to speak into the place where that whisper has been loudest. The called cannot be uncalled. The chosen cannot be unchosen. The assignment written over your life before the foundation of the world was not written in pencil. It was not written conditionally, subject to your performance, or your consistency, or your emotional stability, or your capacity to hold it together through the seasons that were designed to break you down. It was written in the permanent language of a decision, made by the one whose decisions do not expire and do not get revised based on how the situation develops. The warfare is real. The opposition is real. The cost of carrying what you carry in a world that does not always recognize what you carry is genuinely, honestly, humanly real. But none of it has the authority to revoke what was written. None of it has the power to reach back before the beginning and undo the choosing. None of it can access the place where your identity is ultimately held, because that place is not in your emotions, and it is not in your circumstances, and it is not in the opinion of anyone who has ever doubted you or dismissed you or failed to see the fire that you carry. The scripture that belongs to this warfare, to this identity battle, to this specific and targeted campaign against the chosen one's sense of who they are, is this: no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is from me, says the Lord. Isaiah chapter 54, verse 17. Not some weapons, not the ordinary weapons, no weapon. And that includes the weapon of the whispered question. That includes the weapon of the identity erosion. That includes the weapon of the perfectly timed doubt arriving in the moment of greatest depletion. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, not because you are immune to the attack, but because the one who wrote your assignment is also the one who guards it. And what he guards is not subject to the jurisdiction of anything that opposes it. The warfare is not the end of your story. It is the evidence that your story matters. And the chosen one who understands that reframes every attack, not into something painless, but into something informative, into confirmation, into the perverse assurance that what you carry is real, that the calling is genuine, that the fire in you is not self-generated sentiment, but a divinely placed and divinely protected reality that all the weapons of the darkness cannot reach. You are not losing this battle. You are in the middle of it, and the middle of a battle looks like losing until it does not. Hold the ground of your identity. Do not surrender the knowing. Do not let the whisper have the last word. The still, small voice spoke first, and it will speak last, and everything in between is the noise of a war that has already been won by the one who placed the calling inside you before you ever had to fight for it. The warfare has been named. The weapon has been identified. The strategy of the darkness has been exposed for exactly what it is. Not a verdict on your life, but a perverse confirmation of your significance. And now, something in the atmosphere of this message is shifting. Not downward into heavier territory, but upward, into the kind of clarity that arrives after a long fog has finally been named and faced and refused permission to continue defining the landscape. You can feel that shift if you are paying attention. It is the subtle but unmistakable change that happens in a person when truth has done its work, when the thing that was pressing in from the outside has been met with something more solid from the inside, and the inside has held. That holding is not small. In a season like the one you have been navigating, every moment of holding is an act of profound spiritual courage. Every day that you did not surrender the knowing, every night that you woke at 3 a.m. with the pressure on your chest and chose to breathe through it rather than run from it, every conversation where you kept the flame of your calling quiet and protected inside yourself rather than extinguishing it to make other people more comfortable, every one of those moments was a victory. Not the visible kind, not the kind that gets counted or celebrated or even noticed by anyone other than heaven, but real, durable, the kind of victory that becomes the foundation of everything that follows. And what follows is this. What follows is the declaration. Not the declaration you make to the world when the manifestation finally becomes visible. Not the public announcement of the breakthrough after it has arrived and the evidence is undeniable, and the crowd can finally see what they could not see before. The declaration that changes everything is the one you make now, in the middle, before the fog has fully lifted, before the harvest is visible above the soil, before the cave is far enough behind you that the distance makes it comfortable. The declaration you make now, when it costs you something to make it, when it requires you to speak with your mouth what your circumstances have not yet confirmed with their evidence, that declaration is the most powerful one available to you. Because faith that only speaks after the evidence has arrived is not faith. It is observation. It is the simple and ordinary human capacity to acknowledge what is plainly visible. Any person can do that. It requires nothing particular. But the chosen one who speaks the truth of their identity and their calling and their destiny into the space that has not yet filled with the confirmation they are waiting for. That person is operating in the precise frequency where miracles are generated. That person is doing what Elijah did when he prayed for rain with his head between his knees, and his servant looked at a cloudless sky 7 times before a cloud the size of a man's hand appeared on the horizon. Elijah did not wait for the cloud before he prayed. He prayed into the drought, and the cloud came. You have been praying into a drought. You may not have called it prayer. You may have called it endurance or stubbornness, or the inability to fully give up on something that has not yet given you a reason to keep going. But heaven has another name for it. Heaven calls it faith. And faith, even the small and tired and barely holding on kind, is the substance that the unseen is built from. It is the evidence of things not yet visible. It is the seed that the harvest is hiding in, waiting for the due season that will make the invisible suddenly, undeniably, publicly manifest. So, in this moment, having walked through everything this message has carried, having sat with the unnamed pressure, and the 5 prophetic signs, and the wilderness of Elijah, and the still small voice, and the identity warfare, and the truth that the called cannot be uncalled, there is one thing left to do in this section, and it is the simplest and the most significant thing this message will ask of you. Speak it. Right now, in this moment. With whatever strength you have available to you, with whatever measure of belief you can access in this specific season of your journey, type these 4 words into the comments below. I receive it now. Not as a formula, not as a performance, not as the kind of spiritual gesture that people make with their fingers while their hearts remain at a skeptical distance. Type it as a declaration. Type it as the moment you decide, consciously and with whatever courage is available to you, to stop waiting for the external evidence before you align your mouth with what the still, small voice has been saying about you all along. Type it as the moment you choose to agree with heaven about who you are, even if the agreement feels premature, even if the circumstances have not yet caught up with the declaration, even if the only thing you have to stand on is the word that was assembled for you and found you here in this specific moment. I receive it now. 4 words. The most honest and the most powerful thing you can do with this moment. Because here is what happens when the chosen one makes that declaration. Something in the unseen begins to move. Not metaphorically. Not as a poetic description of an internal psychological shift, though that is also real. Something in the actual, literal, spiritual architecture of your situation begins to respond to the alignment of your voice with the truth of heaven. Words have weight. Declarations have consequence. The chosen one who speaks into the drought does not simply feel better about the drought. They participate in the ending of it. Elijah prayed 7 times. The cloud appeared after the 7th prayer, not after the first, and between the first prayer and the 7th, there was nothing visible to confirm that the prayers were doing anything at all. There was only the continued choice to send the servant back to look again, to keep praying into the cloudless sky, to maintain the declaration in the face of unconfirmed evidence. 7 times, and then the cloud, and then the rain, and then the end of a drought that had lasted 3.5 years. Your drought has a duration. It is not infinite. It has a boundary that was set before it began. And somewhere between the prayer you prayed when this season started and the prayer you are praying right now, you are getting closer to the 7th time. You are getting closer to the cloud the size of a man's hand, appearing on the horizon of your life. Small at first, easy to dismiss. Easy to say it is too small to mean what you hope it means, but growing rapidly, undeniably, until the rain comes. And the drought is over, and what was planted in the dry ground breaks through the surface with a force that surprises even the one who planted it in faith. The scripture that holds this declaration, that speaks directly into the moment of choosing to align your voice with heaven before the evidence has fully arrived, is this: death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. Death and life, not small things, not minor adjustments in mood or perspective. Death and life, the full weight of what a human voice, aligned with or misaligned with truth, is capable of producing in the landscape of a chosen one's existence. You have been speaking death over some things that were meant to live, not maliciously, not even consciously, but in the language of agreement with the whisper rather than resistance to it, in the language of the question rather than the declaration, in the language of I am not sure rather than I receive it now. Today that changes. In this moment, it changes. Not because you've suddenly resolved every doubt or answered every question or found the emotional certainty that the faith journey rarely provides on demand, but because you have chosen to love life more than you love the familiar comfort of the question, because you have decided that the fruit of the declaration is worth the vulnerability of making it before the evidence confirms it. Because you are, in this moment, a chosen one who has heard enough truth to take one step further into the light than the darkness expected you to go. Type it. Let it be the act that marks this moment as the moment something shifted. Let it be the line in your story between the season of the question and the season of the declaration. Let it be the prayer that is sent to find the seventh time. Let it be the moment you stopped waiting for permission from your circumstances to agree with what heaven has been saying about you since before you were born. I receive it now. 4 words. The most important thing you will type today, and the beginning of the rain. The declaration has been made. 4 words typed into a space that felt small but landed somewhere vast. 4 words that crossed the threshold between the season of the question and the season of the receiving. And if you typed them honestly, if even a fraction of you meant them when you wrote them, something has already moved. You may not feel it yet. The feeling often comes later, after the declaration has done its initial work in the unseen, after the alignment has begun to produce its fruit in the visible. But the movement is real, regardless of whether the feeling confirms it. Because the movement was never dependent on the feeling. It was dependent on the alignment. And you have aligned. Now comes the part of Elijah's story that everything else has been building toward. Now comes the chapter that makes the wilderness make sense, that makes the juniper tree make sense, that makes the cave and the still small voice and the recommissioning and the long walk back into the unchanged world all make sense in retrospect. Now comes the elevation. And the elevation of Elijah is one of the most precise and most stunning pictures of what happens to a chosen one who does not give up, who walks back out of the cave when every human instinct was screaming to stay inside it, who continues carrying the fire through the seasons that looked from the outside like the fire had gone out. After the wilderness, after the cave, after the recommissioning, Elijah walked back into his assignment with something he did not have before. Not more talent, not more charisma, not a more favorable external environment. What he walked back with was a depth of rootedness that only the wilderness can produce, a settled quality in his identity that the opposition had to shake and failed to shake, a relationship with the still small voice that the noise of the mountain-top season had not yet made possible. He walked back into the world as someone who had been to the edge and returned, and the world, which had not changed in his absence, responded differently to him. Because he was different. Not on the surface, in the foundation. And then something happened that Elijah did not anticipate. On his way back into his assignment, following the specific instructions of the recommissioning he had received in the cave, he found Elisha, a young man plowing a field with 12 yoke of oxen, doing the ordinary work of an ordinary day, giving no external indication that he was anything other than what he appeared to be. And Elijah walked past him and threw his mantle over him. A single gesture, no long explanation, no detailed outline of what the gesture meant or what it would require or where it would ultimately lead. Just the mantle, just the covering, just the passing of the fire from one generation to the next in a moment. So quiet and so ordinary in its setting that the field full of oxen did not even stop moving. Elisha left the oxen. He ran after Elijah. He asked only to go back and kiss his father and mother goodbye, and then he followed. He burned his plowing equipment. He cooked the oxen and fed the people, and then walked away from the life he had been living. Before the mantle landed on his shoulders, he did not need a long runway. He did not need extended preparation or extensive convincing. The mantle was enough. The contact with the fire was enough, because something in Elisha already knew. Something in him had already been prepared for the moment the mantle arrived, even though he had no way of knowing from the outside that the moment was coming. This is the picture of the chosen one's elevation. It does not always look like what you imagined elevation would look like. It does not always come with the fanfare and the public recognition and the dramatic reversal of visible fortune that the culture around calling tends to promise. Sometimes it comes as a mantle thrown over your shoulders in the middle of an ordinary field on an ordinary day. Sometimes it comes as a responsibility rather than a reward. Sometimes the elevation is not upward. In the direction, the world measures upward but deeper, into the kind of significance that cannot be measured by the metrics the world uses to count success. But the mantle changes everything. The contact with the fire changes everything. Because once you have been covered by something that comes from a source greater than yourself, the ordinary life you were living before the covering becomes impossible to return to. Not because it was bad, not because there was anything wrong with the field or the oxen, but because you have now felt the weight of something that fits you in a way nothing else has, and the fit of it makes every other option feel like wearing someone else's clothing. Elisha burned the equipment. He did not leave it neatly arranged in case he needed to come back. He burned it. Because the mantle had landed and there was no coming back from that. Not because the path forward was fully clear, but because the contact with the fire had made the path backward unlivable. Your mantle is landing, or it has already landed, and you have been calling it by other names. You have been calling it the restlessness, the pressure, the disconnection from the life that used to fit, the inability to force yourself back into the smaller version of your existence no matter how many times you have tried. That inability is not a flaw. It is the evidence of the mantle. It is the physical and emotional and spiritual reality of a person who has been covered by something that has made the previous life unlivable. And the burning of the equipment, the releasing of the old tools for the old life, as painful and as disorienting as it has been, is the necessary and the faithful response to the covering that has already landed on you. The elevation that is coming for you is not a reward for your performance. It is the natural and inevitable outcome of a seed that was planted before you knew it was being planted. Watered through seasons you were not sure you would survive. Tended by hands you could not always feel, and sometimes doubted were there. The elevation is the harvest, and the harvest does not come because the farmer deserves it. It comes because the seed was real, and the soil was prepared, and the season has finally arrived. You did not earn the harvest through the suffering of the in-between, but the suffering of the in-between prepared you to carry the harvest without being destroyed by it. Because this is the part that almost no one talks about. The weight of the elevation. The chosen one who arrives at their moment of breakthrough without the depth forged in the wilderness carries a harvest they are not yet equipped to steward. They are given something significant before they have developed the interior architecture to hold it without it becoming a burden rather than a blessing. And the mercy of the long in-between, the counterintuitive mercy of the seasons that felt like punishment, is that they build that architecture. They develop the interior capacity to receive what is coming and to steward it with wisdom and with humility and with the kind of groundedness that does not confuse the harvest with the identity. You are not being elevated because you are now impressive enough to deserve it. You are being elevated because the interior work of the wilderness has built something in you that can hold the weight of what is coming without it consuming you. The depth is there. The roots are there. The character forged in the cave, the compassion produced by the in-between, the settled knowing that survived the identity warfare, all of it is there, and all of it is exactly what the next chapter of your life is going to require. Elijah did not stay with Elisha forever. He walked with him. He taught him. He modeled the carrying of the fire in the daily and the ordinary and the difficult. And then, when the time came, he was taken up in a whirlwind, and Elisha watched him go and cried out, my father, the chariots of Israel and the horsemen thereof." And the mantle fell. Elijah was gone and the mantle was on the ground, and Elisha picked it up and walked to the edge of the Jordan River and struck the water with it. And the water parted, and he walked through on dry ground. The same fire, the same power, a new carrier. The calling continuing into the next generation because one man had been willing to walk back out of his cave and throw a mantle over a farmer in a field on an ordinary day. Your calling does not end with you. What you carry is not for you alone. The fire in you is not a personal comfort. It is a transmission. It is meant to move through you into the lives of people who are waiting, some of them, without knowing they are waiting for the contact with what you carry, the people who will be covered by your mantle, the people whose Jordan rivers will part because you picked up what was given to you and were willing to use it, the people who are in their own fields, right now plowing their ordinary ground, not yet knowing that the moment of covering is closer than the surface of their life suggests. The scripture that belongs to this moment, to the elevation, to the mantle landing, to the chosen one arriving at the threshold of the chapter their entire journey has been preparing them for, is this: for the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. Romans chapter 11, verse 29. Irrevocable, not conditional, not subject to review based on your performance in the wilderness, not revocable by the Jezebel that threatened you, or the cave that housed you, or the drought that tested you, or the question that whispered it in your most depleted moments. Irrevocable, written before you were formed, sustained through every season that tried to convince you it had expired, arriving now with the full weight of a decision that was made before time began and has never once been reconsidered. The crown is descending. The mantle is landing. The host is breaking through the surface of a life that looked from the outside like nothing was growing, but that has been producing underground for longer than you know. The elevation is not somewhere in the distant future, on the other side of more suffering and more waiting and more proving of yourself. It is here. It is now. It is the inevitable outcome of the irrevocable calling meeting the prepared vessel at the appointed time. And the appointed time is not tomorrow. It is not after one more season of the in-between. It is the moment the prepared vessel says, in full voice, without waiting for the external evidence, "I receive it now." You already said that. 4 words, and heaven heard every one of them. You are still here. And the fact that you are still here, having walked through everything this message has carried from the very first word to this final threshold, says something about you that no one else needs to confirm and no circumstance needs to validate. It says that you were ready, not perfectly ready, not ready in the way that means you have resolved every question and silenced every doubt, and arrived at a place of unshakable certainty about every detail of the path ahead. Ready in the way that matters, ready in the way that heaven recognizes, open, present, willing to hear, willing to stay, willing to let the word do its work in the places that needed it most, even when those places were tender, even when the truth landed close to wounds that have not yet fully healed. That willingness is not ordinary. In a world that moves at the speed of the scroll, in a culture that has trained the human attention span to release anything that does not deliver its payload in the first 30 seconds, staying for this entire journey is an act of countercultural courage. It is the act of someone who has decided, somewhere beneath the conscious level of decision-making, that what they carry inside them is worth the investment of genuine attention, that the fire in them deserves more than the surface treatment, that the calling pressing against the inside of their life is significant enough to sit with, to listen to allow to be spoken about in the full and unhurried way that significant things deserve. So, before this message releases you back into the world, there are things that need to be said. Not new things, not additional information or further instruction, or one more layer of content to be processed. What needs to be said now is simpler and more direct than anything that has come before it. What needs to be said is this: you made it through the unnamed pressure of the opening, and the wilderness of Elijah, and the 5 prophetic signs, and the science of frequency, and the cave, and the still small voice, and the identity warfare, and the declaration, and the mantle landing on the threshold of your elevation. You made it through all of it. And the you that is sitting here at the end of this message is not the same as the you that arrived at the beginning. Something has shifted. Something has settled. Something has been named that was previously circling unnamed in the interior of your life, and the naming of it has changed its relationship to you. The pressure is still there, perhaps. The restlessness has not necessarily resolved into a clear and detailed map of the path ahead. The circumstances that surrounded you when this message began have not been rearranged by the listening of it. But something has changed that is more fundamental than circumstances. The internal landscape has shifted. The foundation has been touched, and the chosen one, whose foundation has been touched by truth, carries themselves differently in the world, even when the world around them has not yet caught up with the internal shift. There is one more thing that belongs to this moment. One thing that has not yet been done in this message, and that cannot be left undone. Because everything that has been spoken here, every word that has found its way into the tender and the honest places of your interior life, has been carried on the back of something that is not human in its origin. The depth of the recognition you felt, the precision with which these words found the exact contours of what you have been living, the uncanny accuracy of the naming. None of that originated in a script or a formula or a methodology of content creation. It came from the same source that assembled Elijah's provision under the juniper tree. It came from the same still small voice that spoke in the cave. It came from the one who knew you before you were formed and called you before you had a name and has been pursuing you with a faithfulness that your inconsistency has never once been able to exhaust. And so this message cannot end without prayer. Not the formal, performed kind. Not the kind that sounds impressive from the outside, but feels hollow from the inside. The honest kind. The direct kind. The kind that speaks to the one who is already present in this moment as plainly and as personally as the moment deserves. So if you are willing, wherever you are right now, in whatever posture your body is in, and whatever state your heart is in, let these words be yours as much as they are the words of this message. Father, this one has been carrying something heavy for a long time. They have been in the wilderness, and they have sat under the juniper tree, and they have heard the whisper of the darkness, telling them that they were wrong about themselves, and wrong about the calling, and wrong to keep believing in something that the evidence has not yet confirmed, and they are tired in the way that only chosen ones get tired. Tired from carrying something real in a world that cannot always see what they are carrying. But they are here. They stayed, they listened, they declared, and you saw every moment of it, every sleepless night that was a summons, every conversation that felt hollow because the frequency had changed. Every idea that arrived like a transmission from somewhere beyond the thinking mind. You saw it all and you called it good even when they could not. So now, in this moment, do what only you can do. Let the weight lift in the measure that this season allows. Let the knowing settle in the places where the question has been loudest. Let the mantle they have been sensing descend with a clarity that goes beyond emotion and beyond circumstance and lands in the foundation of who they are. And let everything this message has planted in them grow in due season into the harvest that was written over their life before the world began. Not for their glory alone, for the people whose fields they are going to walk through, for the Elishas waiting in the ordinary ground of their ordinary days for a contact with the fire that only this one can bring. Amen. That prayer was not a performance. It was a participation, and the one who received it is the same one who assembled the provision for Elijah in the wilderness, who asked the still small question in the cave, who threw the mantle over a farmer in a field on a day that looked ordinary until it did not. That one heard every word, and every word landed exactly where it was meant to land. Now, before you go, there are some simple things that cost you very little, but mean more than you may realize to the continuation of this work and to the next chosen one who needs to find it. If something in this message reached you, if even one section found a place in you that needed to be found, share it. Not with an explanation, not with a long personal testimony attached. Just share it. Send it to the person whose face appeared in your mind during the cave section. Send it to the one you know is under their own juniper tree right now. Let the message do what it was assembled to do, and trust that it will find the right places in them, the same way it found the right places in you. Like this message, if you have not already. It is a small act that participates in a large outcome, placing this word in front of more people who are carrying the unnamed pressure and the holy restlessness and the 5 prophetic signs of a calling, pressing toward its season of emergence. Your single click extends the reach of what was spoken here in ways that compound down beyond what any individual act of generosity typically produces. Subscribe if you have not yet made this a regular space in your life, because what was spoken here today is not a one-time encounter. It is an ongoing conversation between the truth that does not change and the chosen ones who are in every season of the journey at every given moment. The next message is already being assembled, and it is being assembled for someone. that someone may be you. And if this space has given you something real, if the investment of this message has produced something in you that you recognize as valuable and lasting, consider sewing into it through the donation link in the description and in the pinned comment below. Whatever you give it as a seed. Because this is a field that produces, and seeds planted in fields that produce come back in ways that exceed the measure of the original planting. You are not leaving this message the same as you arrived. The shift is real even if it is quiet. The movement is happening even if it is underground. The mantle has landed even if the world has not yet seen what it will produce. And the irrevocable calling that was written over your life before time began is not deterred by the length of the in-between, or the cost of the wilderness, or the warfare of the darkness, or any of the seasons that tried to convince you that the call had expired. It has not expired. It will not expire. You were chosen before the foundation of the world, and you are chosen still, and you will be chosen on the other side of every season that tries to tell you otherwise. Go now, carry the fire, throw your mantle. The fields are full of Elishas who do not yet know you are coming. And you are coming.